The scent of warm soup filled the air as Leela stacked bowls on the counter, her hands trembling slightly from the chill outside. It was another long evening at the shelter, another day of surviving. She didn't expect anything to change until a tall man in a dark coat stepped through the door. His presence silenced the room. Leela froze. That face, older, sharper, but still achingly familiar. Ethan Cole. Her first love, the man she hadn't seen in 10 years, was standing right there in front of her. Serving line or not. Ethan didn't recognize her at first. The years had changed her. Tired eyes, thrift store clothes, a quiet strength beneath the exhaustion. But when she spoke his name softly, his hand stopped midair. "Leela," he whispered, disbelief washing over his face. In that single moment, the noise, the clatter, the cold, all disappeared. Only memories remained. The girl he once promised forever to. The girl he'd lost when his world turned to steel and glass. Ethan hadn't expected to see her there, of all places. The last time he saw Leela, she had tears in her eyes and a suitcase in her hand. He had chosen ambition over love back then. Now, looking at her surrounded by volunteers, humility in her every gesture, he felt something heavy break inside him. She didn't need his money or pity, just the recognition that she still mattered to someone. Leela could feel the weight of his gaze. The Ethan she once knew was gone. This man carried loss in his shoulders. Rumor said his wife had died 2 years ago. She saw it in his eyes, loneliness masked by pride. "It's been a long time," she said gently. "Too long," he replied, voice rough with emotion. The next morning, Ethan found himself driving past the shelter again. He told himself it was coincidence, but deep down he knew the truth. He wanted to see her. Seattle's skyline suddenly felt meaningless, compared to that worn-down street corner where hope was handed out in paper cups. He asked around discreetly, learning Leela worked 2 jobs to support her son. Leela, on the other hand, had no idea Ethan had quietly started donating to the shelter in her name. He didn't want credit, just a way to help without reopening wounds. But fate had other plans. When her young son fell ill, their worlds would collide once more. Leela's son, Max, had a fever that refused to break. She sat beside his bed, whispering stories to keep him calm. When the doctor mentioned a private children's clinic, she hesitated. Money was tight. That night, a call came. Someone had covered Max's hospital expenses. The nurse wouldn't say who. Leela had her suspicions, but dared not believe. The next morning, Ethan appeared at the hospital, holding flowers and a shy smile. "I didn't want to overstep," he said softly, "but I couldn't stand the thought of you struggling alone." Leela's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. As Max recovered, Ethan visited often, bringing stories for the boy and silent memories for Leela. Sometimes their hands brushed, and both would freeze, caught between what was and what might still be. Chloe, Ethan's daughter, soon joined, instantly bonding with Max over crayons and cartoons. Their laughter filled the hospital halls like sunlight. One evening, as Leela walked them out, Chloe slipped her small hand into hers. "You make Daddy smile again," she whispered. Leela's breath caught. She watched Ethan looking back at her under the fading sunset, eyes full of something old and unfinished. Maybe, just maybe, love wasn't done with them yet. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's visits became the highlight of Max's recovery. The boy laughed more now, and Lila couldn't ignore the way Ethan's presence softened the edges of her hard days. The walls she built around her heart began to crack. One smile, one kind gesture at a time. Yet fear lingered. She had been hurt before. Could she trust him again, after all this time? Ethan noticed how cautious she was. He didn't push. He showed up with groceries, fixed her broken porch light, and shared silly stories with Max and Chloe. Slowly, their lives began to intertwine again, unplanned but meant to be. One rainy afternoon, Lila found an old box in her closet. Inside were photos. 2 kids laughing by a lake, a young Ethan with dreams too big for the town they grew up in. She smiled through tears. The past wasn't all pain. It held beauty too. But she closed the lid quickly, afraid of reopening old wounds. That evening, Ethan stopped by with dinner. When he noticed her red eyes, he didn't ask questions. He simply sat beside her, his silence saying everything. For the first time in years, Leela allowed herself to lean against someone else and not feel weak for doing so. People in the small town had begun to notice. Whispers followed them about the CEO and the soup kitchen girl. Leela tried to ignore it, but deep down she feared judgment. The world had always been kind to him, not her. She'd fought for every meal, every smile. "They don't know us," Ethan said gently. "Let them talk." Still, she hesitated to let herself hope. Every time Ethan's hand brushed hers, every glance that lingered too long, it scared her how much she wanted it. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she saw something pure. Redemption, regret, maybe even love. Chloe's 8th birthday came on a sunny Saturday. Balloons, cake, laughter. It was the first time in years Leela had seen Ethan truly happy. Max and Chloe played like siblings, and Leela couldn't help but feel like they were already a family. Ethan caught her watching him and smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that made her heart race. When everyone left, he handed her a cupcake with a single candle. "For you," he said, "for every birthday I missed." Lila laughed softly, eyes glistening. "You can't make up for all of them." He looked at her, voice trembling. "Maybe not, but I'll try." Just when everything seemed to settle, a ghost returned. Ethan's late wife's brother, Mark. He confronted Ethan outside the clinic, accusing him of moving on too fast, of betraying his sister's memory. The words cut deep. Ethan didn't defend himself. He just stood there, silent, taking every hit. Lila saw the confrontation from afar. Her heart ached. She knew guilt could eat a person alive. That night, she found him sitting by the lake alone, lost in thought. She sat beside him, not saying a word. Sometimes, love wasn't about fixing someone. It was about sitting quietly in their storm. Lila couldn't sleep. She pulled out the letters she had written years ago but never sent. Letters full of anger, love, and words she was too proud to say. The next day, she handed them to Ethan. "I think you should read these," she whispered. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. Ethan read every word, each letter breaking him open. He saw the pain his choices had caused, the nights she cried alone, the hope she never lost. When he looked up, tears blurred his vision. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said. "Maybe," she replied softly, "but you still have my heart." The next week, Ethan surprised her. He bought an old cafe downtown, the one where they'd had their first date years ago, and began restoring it. "For the community," he said. But Lila knew better. It was his way of making amends, of building something meaningful again. She offered to help, and soon they were painting, sanding, laughing, side by side. For the first time, their future didn't seem impossible. Between coffee stains and old wood, they rediscovered something precious. Joy in simple things, love in shared silence, peace in each other's company. Life has a cruel way of testing hearts. One rainy night, as Ethan drove Chloe home, a truck skidded on the wet road. In an instant, everything went dark. Hours later, Leela got the call. Ethan was in the hospital, unconscious but stable. Panic swallowed her whole. She rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. Sitting beside his bed, she held his hand tightly. "You're not leaving me again," she whispered through sobs. "Not this time." Chloe slept nearby, clutching her toy bear. The monitor beeped steadily, as if echoing Leela's heartbeat, fragile but determined. 2 days later, Ethan opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Leela's face, tear-streaked yet smiling. "Hey," she whispered, voice breaking. "You scared us." He smiled weakly, reaching for her hand. "You stayed," she nodded. "Always." Recovery was slow, but Ethan had changed. The accident reminded him what truly mattered. He sold his corporate shares and focused on his new cafe, his children and Leela. Life no longer needed to be perfect. It just needed to be real. And with her, it finally was. The cafe opened under a clear night sky, string lights glowing softly. The town gathered to celebrate, and for once, Leela wasn't just the girl from the shelter. She was the heart of something new. Ethan stood beside her, pride and love shining in his eyes. As the night ended, they stepped outside. The stars reflected in the lake, calm and endless. "You know," Ethan said, "I used to wish for a second chance." Leela smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you got one," she whispered, "so don't waste it." He kissed her forehead. Never again. The cafe quickly became the soul of the town. Every Sunday morning, Ethan brewed coffee while Lila baked muffins, laughter echoing through the small space. Customers noticed how they moved around each other, like they'd been doing it for years, an unspoken rhythm only love could teach. Sometimes when she caught his eyes lingering on her, she'd blush and look away. He'd just smile. No grand gestures, no promises this time, just consistency. Every morning he showed up. Every night he locked the door beside her. That's how she knew this was real. One evening, Chloe proudly handed Lila a crayon drawing. "It's our family," she said. The picture showed Ethan, Chloe, Lila, and Max holding hands under a rainbow. Lila's heart swelled, but tears filled her eyes. Children always saw the truth adults were afraid to admit. Ethan knelt beside Chloe, smiling softly. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Then he looked at Lila. "She sees what I feel," he whispered. Lila couldn't speak, only nodded. That night, she tucked Chloe into bed, feeling the little girl's arms around her neck. It felt like belonging, something she hadn't known in years. Just when life seemed peaceful, Lila's past caught up with her. Her ex, Ryan, the father who'd abandoned Max, showed up at the cafe. Broke, bitter, and desperate, he demanded money and threatened to take Max away. Panic froze Lila's heart. Ethan stepped between them, calm but firm. "You'll leave now," he said quietly. Ryan sneered. "You think money makes you his father?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Later, as Lila trembled in the back room, Ethan took her hands. "He won't hurt you again," he promised. For the first time, she believed him. The encounter stirred something deep in Ethan. He knew what it meant to protect someone you loved, to fight for family. That night, he tucked Chloe in, but his mind lingered on Max. The boy had slowly become part of his world, his laughter echoing through every room, his trust a precious gift. Later, Lila found Ethan sitting by the fire, lost in thought. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said softly. He looked up, eyes heavy with emotion. "I'm not just carrying it," he whispered. "I want it. All of it. Max, you, the mess, everything." Valentine's Day arrived quietly, the cafe filled with handmade paper hearts. Chloe and Max had spent hours decorating, unaware of the deeper meaning behind the day. Lila didn't expect anything special, but Ethan did. He placed a single white rose on her counter with a note. "For the love I never stopped believing in." Her hands shook as she read it. That night, after closing, they stood under falling snow, silence stretching between them. Then finally, he kissed her, gentle, hesitant, like a prayer. It wasn't fireworks. It was peace. And it was perfect. News of their relationship spread fast. Some cheered. Others whispered that she was after his money. The gossip stung, reopening old insecurities Lila thought she'd buried. She began pulling away, avoiding his gaze, her laughter fading. Ethan noticed but gave her space, knowing love couldn't be forced. One evening, he placed her hand on his chest. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "This is real, Lila. Don't let their noise drown it out." Tears slid down her cheeks as she nodded. Sometimes, love wasn't about loud declarations, it was about quiet truth. A snowstorm swept through the town, trapping them in the cafe overnight. The power went out, leaving only candlelight. Wrapped in blankets, they shared stories of mistakes, fears, and forgiveness. Lila confessed she still woke up afraid sometimes, waiting for things to fall apart. Ethan took her trembling hands. "I can't promise life won't hurt again," he said softly. "But I can promise I won't run." The storm raged outside, but inside there was calm. Two broken souls, finally finding warmth in each other's light. Weeks later, Ethan planned a quiet dinner. Candles, soft music, and a small velvet box in his pocket. But before he could speak, Lila's old fears surfaced. "I'm not ready," she whispered, tears welling. "Every time I trust happiness, it disappears." Ethan froze, then nodded gently. He didn't argue. He just reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then I'll wait," he said. "Love isn't about timing, it's about staying," she cried quietly, realizing how rare it was to be loved without pressure, without conditions. Spring arrived with soft rain and new beginnings. On Lila's birthday, Ethan surprised her with a framed picture. Chloe and Max holding a sign that read, "Home is you." Her heart melted. "You always know what to say," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "Maybe because I stopped talking and started listening." He handed her a small key. "To the apartment upstairs," he said. "It's yours if you want it. No strings, just a place to breathe." Lila looked at him, eyes brimming with gratitude. "You're making it hard not to love you," she murmured. "That's the plan," he said softly. One morning, a letter arrived addressed to Ethan from his late wife. It had been found among old files. Her words were tender, forgiving, urging him to live again and love freely. As he read, tears fell silently. It was the closure he didn't know he needed. He handed the letter to Lila, voice shaking. "She wanted me to move on." Lila smiled sadly. Then maybe this is her gift to you. Ethan pulled her into his arms. To us, he whispered. And for the first time, the past finally let go. The cafe's success drew attention. A major coffee chain offered to buy it, promising Ethan wealth beyond measure again. But when he looked at the contract, all he saw was his old life, the one that cost him everything. Leela watched him struggle, knowing the temptation it carried. That night, Ethan burned the offer letter in the fireplace. I built this for love, not profit, he said. Leela smiled softly. Then you've already won. The flames flickered in their eyes, reflecting something far richer than money. Peace, earned one small act of courage at a time. Max and Chloe's school play filled the auditorium with laughter and applause. Leela watched as Ethan filmed proudly, his face glowing with pride. When Max called him Dad on stage by accident, the crowd chuckled, but Ethan froze. His heart swelled so much it hurt. Afterward, he knelt beside Max. You can call me that any time, buddy. Max grinned shyly, wrapping his arms around him. From across the room, Leela watched, tears in her eyes. She didn't need promises or proposals. This, her son's smile, their joined laughter, was love in its purest form. Late one night, Leela received a call from her estranged mother. Ill and alone, she needed help. Old wounds reopened, the abandonment, the silence. Ethan urged her gently. Go to her. Sometimes forgiveness heals us more than them. Reluctantly, Leela agreed. When she returned days later, her eyes carried new light. I told her I forgave her, she whispered. Ethan smiled. And do you feel lighter? Leela nodded, tears glistening. For the first time, yes. He took her hand. Then maybe now, your heart finally has room for forever. One evening, Ryan returned. This time sober, claiming he wanted to be part of Max's life. Leela's heart twisted with confusion. Ethan's protectiveness flared, but Leela stopped him. He's still Max's father, she said quietly. But Max will decide. When Max saw Ryan, he simply said, You left. He stayed. The words silenced Ryan completely. Later, Ethan hugged the boy tightly, tears in his eyes. You didn't have to choose, Ethan whispered. Max smiled. I didn't. I just knew. Ethan found the velvet box again, the ring from the night he couldn't ask. This time, he carried no fear, no hesitation. He slipped it into his pocket, knowing the moment would come naturally. Love wasn't about timing. It was about truth. That night, after closing the cafe, they stood by the lake again. You once said, happiness disappears, he murmured. But maybe it just waits until we're ready. He opened the box, revealing the ring glimmering under moonlight. Leela James, will you build the rest of this imperfect, beautiful life with me? Her answer was a trembling, tearful yes. They married in the cafe garden, beneath strings of warm lights and soft music. Chloe tossed petals, Max carried the rings, and the town gathered to celebrate love that had been reborn. Leela wore a simple dress, but Ethan thought she looked like magic itself. When they danced, he whispered, You taught me to be human again. She smiled through tears. And you taught me love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to stay. The stars above seemed to agree, shining a little brighter that night. The cafe grew into more than a business. It became a community haven. They started a fund for single parents, offering meals and small grants. Leela often said, No one should have to face the world alone. Ethan watched her lead with compassion and pride. Every morning began with laughter, children running around, coffee brewing, hearts healing. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't grand, but it was home. And for two people who had once lost everything, that was everything. Life, however, never stays still. One evening, a storm hit the town hard, flooding roads, damaging homes, even breaking the cafe windows. But this time, they didn't panic. Together, with neighbors and friends, they rebuilt, side by side, stronger than ever. When the power returned days later, Ethan looked around at the people gathered inside. "We didn't lose anything," he said softly. "We just remembered what mattered." Lila smiled, wiping dirt from her hands. "And we remembered who we are." On the anniversary of their first meeting at the soup kitchen, Ethan took Lila there again. The place had changed. New faces, same warmth. They served food together quietly, side by side, just like the night their story began. As they handed a meal to a young mother, Lila's eyes softened. "Do you think she'll find what we did?" Ethan smiled gently. "If she believes, she will." Then he slipped his arm around her. "We made it through, Lila. We kept the promise we didn't even know we'd made." Years later, the cafe still stood, its windows filled with laughter and light. Chloe was off to college. Max helped run the place, and Ethan and Lila sat by the lake most evenings, older, wiser, deeply in love. One sunset, Lila leaned on his shoulder. "You ever think about how far we've come?" Ethan smiled. "Every day. I still remember the soup kitchen, the day my heart came back to life." She squeezed his hand. "And I remember the man who learned love isn't found, it's built." The sun dipped below the horizon, but their light remained. 10 years after its opening, the cafe hosted its anniversary celebration. Photos of the journey lined the walls. Ethan and Lila in paint-splattered clothes, Chloe and Max as kids, the townspeople rebuilding after the storm. Laughter filled every corner. Lila looked around, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "No," he said softly. "You did it. You built this with kindness, not coffee." She smiled, leaning against him. "We both did. Together." And together was the only word that had ever really mattered. Chloe returned from college with a sparkle in her eyes and a dream to expand the cafe brand, not for money, but to spread its message of hope. "Every town needs a place like this," she said proudly. Ethan smiled, seeing her mother's warmth and his resolve reflected in her. Later that night, Lila told Ethan, "You see what we've done? We didn't just build a life. We built a legacy." He took her hand, whispering, "It started with one bowl of soup and a broken promise." Lila smiled through tears. "And it ended with love, keeping every one of them." One morning, Ethan found an envelope tucked into his coffee mug, Lila's handwriting on the front. Inside, she'd written a letter full of love and memories, thanking him for saving her, for choosing her, for believing in second chances. He laughed softly, then looked up to find her watching him. "You're not leaving me, are you?" he teased. She grinned. "Not in this lifetime." They both laughed, knowing they'd faced too much to ever part now. But deep down, the letter meant something else, a quiet preparation for whatever life would bring next. Years passed gently. The cafe grew busier, the family larger. Grandchildren's laughter filled every corner. Ethan and Lila, now gray-haired but still inseparable, walked each morning to the same lake where everything began. The water shimmered gold under sunrise, calm and endless. "Oh, morning," Ethan whispered. If today was our last day, I'd still wake up grateful. Leela smiled, eyes full of peace. That's how I feel every day. They held hands in silence, the world soft and still around them, love woven into every breath they took. When Leela passed quietly one spring morning, Ethan returned to the cafe she loved. He placed a white rose by her favorite table and whispered, "You kept every promise, my love." A gentle breeze brushed his face, as if she were answering back. Years later, the cafe remained open, run by Chloe and Max, still serving warmth to anyone who walked through its doors. On the wall hung a plaque that read, "Built on love, kept by kindness." And every sunset, the light through the window looked a little like her smile, proof that true love never really leaves.